Welcome to this episode of The Build-Up, presented by the Florida Home Builders Association, serving up fresh perspectives on politics, building, and beyond.
Welcome everyone to The Build-Up. I'm Ryan Benson, president of the Florida Home Builders Association and co-owner of A. Vernon Allen Builder, a premier custom home builder based in Naples and Sanibel.
And I'm John Riddle. I'm vice president of Turning Leaf Custom Homes. We're a custom builder based in Sanford, and we build throughout all of Central Florida.
So today we are graced with the presence of Michael Bourré. Michael is the chairman of the Florida Building Commission. He's also past president of the Florida Home Builders Association, one of the best presidents we've had for the association. And we're going to talk to him today about the commission, his story, how we came about, what we're doing with the commission. So going right into it, Michael, let's start with the Marine Corps, or growing up and you going into the Marine Corps. Tell us the story of that.
Well, very good. It's a pleasure to be here with both of you. Thank you so much for the invitation. I can't start that story off without talking about my father. My father was a 32-year Marine. He retired as a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps, and I was blessed to be able to be raised by him and to travel all over the world. I went to high school in Naples, Italy. I graduated high school in Okinawa, Japan, and just had some amazing adventures. And so from that, I obviously loved the Marine Corps and all the opportunities that I had. And so I ended up joining and spent 8 years in the Corps and worked as a field radio operator and jumped out of planes. So basically, I was airborne with a radio and just had a great time. Great group of guys, great experiences, a lot of great training. The beauty of coming out of the youth of teenage years for a young man and going into the Marine Corps is it really kind of snaps you into focus, whether you want to or not. The Marine Corps kind of focuses you very quickly through the training and the discipline, and that's carried with me my entire life. So I'm very appreciative of that.
So how did you end up then going from the Marine Corps into construction? Did you go right into founding Bourré Construction Group, or what was your path to that?
No, I appreciate you asking that. No, I actually went to the University of Florida, and while I was there, I was very close friends with some other Marines who were also attending there, and they introduced a construction materials class to me. So I joined that class and ended up falling in love with the business. And from that, it stemmed all the way through my Bachelor of Science in Construction Management from the University of Florida. And then from there, I worked with a local general contractor while I was at school. And then transitioned out of the University of Florida to a job with a company out of Atlanta, Georgia, building high-rises. So I actually absolutely love the big work, the elevated platforms. My tallest project was an 18-story high-rise up in Atlanta. So just a broad exposure to different elements in construction, and absolutely loved it. But that's how I transitioned.
And then when did you decide to go on your own from that company?
So I moved down from Atlanta, Georgia, building, again, high-rises to Jacksonville, Florida, and took a operations manager's position for a local home builder, and spent 3 years there learning residential construction, which is completely different than the commercial application. So once I had my feet on the ground for the residential piece of it, it was time to branch off on my own, and just saw opportunity. Jacksonville, Northeast Florida, at that time and still currently is, a great market. We've seen a lot of growth. We've also seen downturns. We've lived through those, but just an opportunity to kind of plant my own flag, develop, a business that I think is founded on all the right things: attention to detail, focus on our customers, and taking care of our employees. Those are all fundamental components of our business.
But what was that springboard to go off on your own? Was it a client? Was it like a project? Like what let you make that jump? Because we've all had that jump in our career.
We have. That's a great question. I think inherently there are those of us that are risk takers, and there are those of us that are not wired that way. And I've always been more on the side of being a risk taker. And when you see opportunity and you see ways of doing things better, more efficient, then, and sometimes you're not able to exercise those feelings until you go out on your own and you explore those. And sometimes you fail, sometimes you succeed, and it's a home run, and you've got to learn how to weather those ups and downs in life, not just as a business owner, but through personal trials and tribulations as well. There's challenges that come, and our ability to improvise, adapt, and overcome, which is from the Marine Corps, is what allows us to be successful and find opportunities in environments that otherwise may not be as obvious to others. And being the hardest one that works in the room, the hardest individual working in the room, has always kind of been my mantra, and most successful men and women that I know follow that same concept. They want to be the hardest ones working in the room, not necessarily the smartest. I'm certainly not the smartest guy in the room, but I have learned over the years to surround myself with those people who are smarter than me, who have subject matter expertise that I may not have. And I want to make sure that they're in the room with me, or they're a phone call away in case there's a question that I might have. And so those are elements that have allowed me to continue through even the Great Recession and continue with a business that is very healthy.
So Michael, so you started your own company, literally jumped out of an airplane before that. And getting started in residential construction, help us walk through your pathway of how you got involved with your local HBA chapter, and then please continue the story on to where you ascended into ultimately the president of our Florida Home Builders Association.
All right. Thank you, John. I appreciate the question. So when I first started my business, there was a gentleman who was our executive director at the Northeast Florida Builders Association. His name is Arnold Tritt Sr. And he was a very, very gracious, very humble gentleman. And when I walked in the room for my first meeting, NFBA is very intimidating when you first walk in if you don't know anybody, because it is a group of all of the shakers and the movers of our industry in this area. And Mr. Tritt walked up to me, and he grabbed my hand with both of his hands and introduced himself and asked me to introduce myself to him. And once he asked me what I did. Was I a subcontractor? Was I a contractor? And so through that, he said, I'm going to walk you around the room, and I'm going to introduce you to the people you need to know. He was so gracious, and I am so appreciative of him to this day. And he walked me around and introduced me to the past presidents of NFBA, the key leaders of NFBA, and the subcontractors that are integral to the NFBA program. And those relationships have carried me my entire business life. And so I'm very grateful for Mr. Tritt. And so from that, he instilled a seed in me right out of the gate of the family environment and how we are all here to help each other. I have direct competitors, even to this day. I have direct competitors that are in that room with me, and we'll chase the same projects together, but they are personal friends of mine now. I mean, we call each other, socially. We see each other with our wives when we all get together. They've truly developed into another family. And that, I think, stems from the initial interaction I had with Mr. Tritt when I first joined the association. And that has led me through the opportunity to be the president for NFBA, the Northeast Florida Builders Association's president, back in 2011. And so through that, obviously I love the program. I love what NFBA stands for, and ultimately I love what FHBA stands for. The Florida Home Builders Association protects us across the state from things that may be unwieldy for builders to continue to do our business, or developers to continue to do business in our state. And so FHBA and our locals, including NFBA, all have a fundamental role in protecting our industry and what we do. And so that transition was a very natural transition. As I was NFBA president, I was more introduced to FHBA and what was going on at the state level, and then jumped in with both feet. As my time as the president for the local started to wane, I was able to then re-engage or engage more intensely at the state level, and just met a beautiful group of people, very intelligent and very fun and very passionate about what I'm passionate about, which is protecting our industry, making sure we have the right of governmental officials making the right decisions to protect the citizens of Florida. And also, I want to have a good time while we do it. And finding that group
We do.
was key for me. And so I was all in at the state level. And through that, I was asked to consider running for the state president's position. Very graciously, I accepted, and I was very humbled to be able to have an opportunity to then again represent our industry on a broader stage at FHBA.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. Your time as president at FHBA, we all remember very well, but for our listeners, update them on what was happening in the world and then expand upon what you consider some of your key accomplishments and the initiatives that you were able to direct as president.
Okay. Well, it was 2020. It was the year 2020, and we all remember that was a great year. It was not a year of any drastic change. Nothing crazy happened. Oh wait, we had the pandemic, and so we came into 2020 with a plan that was going to fully engage face to face at locals and at state level and with our legislative or elected officials to be able to carry the water, if you will, or do the business of FHBA. And it was shortly into in fact, it was right after our spring conference when the wheels kind of fell off the vehicle for the plan for that year. And that was when COVID went into effect and the lockdowns went into effect. And so we had to make a very hard shift away from the initial plan of face-to-face interactions with all of our locals and elected officials. And then we had to now shift into how are we going to make sure that this international pandemic does not affect our ability in Florida to conduct business as builders and developers and subcontractors. And so fortunately we have an exceptional staff at FHBA. And we huddled together multiple times as part of this transition to come up with a plan in order to make sure that our members were fully engaged, and to make sure that our voices were heard, on the state scene and nationally, but on the state scene. And so one of our biggest accomplishments was right out of the gate when the whole world was shutting down, and states were shutting down. We were kind of dabbling with potentially Florida shutting down. We immediately went to the governor's office with a plan and a request to be added to the essential services designation for the state of Florida. And by doing that, that means that we were allowed to continue to still work. We did have some guidelines from OSHA that we needed to adhere to, but it meant that our projects could still move forward. We could still continue to build. We can still continue to meet in the offices. Obviously, we had the 6 foot separate. We had certain guidelines both in the offices and on the job sites to adhere to make sure that we didn't make the pandemic worse. But the goal here was to make sure that our industry continue to operate in a healthy and sustainable way, and not be shut down by something like a pandemic or something that's completely out of our control. And so I recall specifically when, South Florida and specifically Miami was, even after the governor had designated us as essential service, we were hearing some concerns coming out of South Florida where they were trying to push that when the new construction envelope was fully enclosed, which means all the windows and doors were installed, that they had to shut the job down. Well, as general contractors, we know that you can't shut a job down. The jobs need to continue to move. It costs everybody money, and it costs jobs to the citizens of Florida. And so what we were able to do is, well, one, there was a very smart general contractor down there who basically just kept one window open. And so then he was he was allowed to continue to move forward, and was able to meet that guideline up until the governor stepped in and said, that's a no-go. As long as they're adhering to, because they're essential service, they can continue to move forward. And so, again, very thankful for an amazing governor, and the legislature, but also very thankful for our staff. FHBA staff is above reproach. They've done such a great job, and I was so pleased to have them with us during that very, very difficult time in my presidential year.
Yeah, we all remember how helpful, and that allowed us really all to stay in business. I mean, we never stopped working. None of it. My company never stopped building. being considered an essential service was key, and I know our members join me in thanking you for your leadership on that. That was really quite the effort that you pulled through. Was there any other, I mean, COVID aside, were there any other highlights to your presidency that you'd like to chat with us about?
Well, we were able to conduct the first virtual SEBC. It was a complete shift. So the Southeastern Builders Conference is where we all come together once a year down in Orlando, and we have an opportunity to meet trades, vendors, subcontractors, to look at new and innovative means and methods, products, it's really a chance. We also come together for continuing education for those who have an opportunity to participate in that. So it's where really the Florida building industry comes together. And that obviously, because of COVID, was not an option. So we ended up moving to a virtual SEBC, based on the situation and the circumstances we were faced with, we did a great job. The staff did a great job. We had good participation. But I will tell you, we were very happy to get back to a face-to-face interaction, which we obviously were the following year. So that was another huge accomplishment for us.
Well, that's so important for our industry. We grow, we continue to learn, and through our networking. It's just an amazing aspect of being a member of the Home Builders Associations, whatever level you're on, whether it's our local chapters or state level or even the national level. So let's transition, Michael. So NEFBA President, Northeast Florida Builders Association, Florida Home Builders Association President, and then someone taps you on the shoulder or gives you a phone call and says, Michael, we've got a position on the Florida Building Commission, and I know you moved into that. For our listeners, let's talk a little bit about what is the Florida Building Commission and how does that affect and benefit our industry.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you. So the Florida Building Commission is made up right now of 19 members. They're members from all over the state, representing all of the different aspects of construction. From design, we have architects, engineers, all the way through our sub-base. And the beginning stages of the Florida Building Commission really came, for those of us who have been in Florida for a very long time, remember Hurricane Andrew in 1992 that hit South Florida. When Hurricane Andrew hit, it became very apparent very quickly that we needed a better building code for the state of Florida. The damage from Andrew was catastrophic. I was living in West Palm Beach at the time, and we were down there with our church group within 3 days with supplies, clothes, food, water, and whatnot, and the devastation was horrific, quite frankly. We saw slabs completely wiped clean of the residents that were built on top of them, and it was just a sea of concrete slabs. And so that obviously is a leading indicator that there is a concern. So the state legislature in 1998 put together the Florida Building Commission, and so the Florida Building Code was developed from 1998 through 2001. In March of 2001 is when the first version of the Florida Building Code went into effect. We are currently on the 8th edition of the Florida Building Code that went into effect in 2025, and we're working currently on the 9th edition, which will go into effect in 2026. And so what we do is we get together as the Florida Building Commission multiple times a year, really about every 2 months. Let me back up. When the Florida Building Commission was first established, it was 27 members, and those 27 members was all in-person meetings. The meetings were days and days long because there's so much information to process through, to take all of the different local building codes that were in place since 1974 and compile them or cobble them all together with all the subject matter experts and all the data that was collected from hurricane and windborne debris and structural resistance. All of that needed to be pulled together, and so it took that long. And then in March of 2001, the first Florida Building Code was put into effect. And since then, the Florida Building Commission that was established by the legislature has met to continue to improve on that building code. And so what we do when we meet is there's a whole process, obviously, as we're ramping up for a new code, and then we're winding down and then moving into to the next 3 years. So every 3 years we have a new Florida building code based on today's current law. And so during that process, we come together as the Florida Building Commission, again, with all these different subject matter experts from all over the state, and we review all of the proposed changes or any proposed modifications. And through our different work group, we have work groups, we have tax, and we have POCs. And so those groups come together and review all the different subject matter that's being presented. And then after it's been reviewed, the TAC or the POC make their recommendations to the Florida Building Commission, and the Florida Building Commission then takes that under advisement, and then will render a final decision or recommendation to the legislature to make something or to put something into law or not.
Michael, what's a TAC?
A technical advisory committee.
Okay, all right.
Yep. And so we have. Well, let me talk just for a second about how we develop the code, and then I'll jump over to the tax. So we are a consensus-based group, and so we have to have a supermajority, and so that supermajority is 75% or more of an approval before anything gets enacted. So part of what we do is we look at what the financial implications are for any code change. In other words, are we now, based on a new code modification, are we now making residential, for instance, homes unaffordable? Those are concerns. So we're not only looking at, what's the best product available, we're also looking at what's best for the citizens of Florida. And if we have a code that is so stringent that we're building bunkers everywhere, well, the citizens of Florida won't be able to afford that product. And so we try to find that balance between what is economically feasible and what is for the safety of the citizens of Florida. And so what we have is a Hurricane Research Advisory Committee. This is one of our multiple groups that we have that meet outside of the Florida Building Commission and then provide recommendations to the Florida Building Commission. And so the Hurricane Research Advisory Committee is one that we have. In fact, we have 2 items right now that we're looking at. One is the windborne debris on non-coastal environments, and then the other one is the underlayment for roof tiles. And so these are 2 separate studies that we've now conducted through the University of Florida. We bring all that information together, and then we render a kind of a final decision or final suggestion to the legislature. And so we're made up of not just the members of the Florida Building Commission themselves, but we're made up of such a broad group of other individuals who are also subject matter experts, who are appointed by the Florida Building Commission to provide us with input on code recommendations or modifications to the next Florida Building Code.
And before we get into your role there, how is flood playing into this now? Because that's become a large issue, having been through Hurricane Ian and then Milton and Helene locally and other hurricanes across the state. The flood component and storm surge is becoming a major concern and focus. But I also know there's federal guidelines that supersede what we can do at the state level. So is there any consideration from the commission on how to address the flood component?
Absolutely. That's actually one of our primary focuses. So we engaged the University of Florida, and specifically Dr. Pravat, to come and give us updates. It was an immediate damage assessment right after the 2 biggest hurricanes that we've had recently. And then they give us supplemental updates on those. And it allows the commission to see how structures performed during these flood events, or when we have a storm surge. Allows us to see how structures interact and whether the structures were built in accordance with the code or not. And what we have seen, now storm surge is its own animal, but what we've seen predominantly in the hurricane damage and windborne debris damage are properties or structures that were built prior to the Florida Building Code. That's where we see, and I'm going to go on an edge and say over 90% of the damage we see come from homes that were built before the Florida Building Code, which tells us the Florida Building Code is doing what it's supposed to do. It's doing an excellent job, and it's holding everybody to a standard that protects the citizens of Florida. Now, storm surge is part of that component. We have, as part of that review with Dr. Pravat from the University of Florida, we see where structure elevations are. We've seen video or we've seen pictures of homes that are on piles, for instance, that are elevated on piles, and then we've seen where citizens have come in and built between those piles ancillary structures that actually act as a sail, on a sailboat. And so when that storm surge comes, it actually adds additional horizontal force against that foundation system. And so we've seen, I don't know what the percentage is, but we've seen a lot of failure in structures because of that situation where folks are adding additional structure underneath that the home was not designed for, or the foundation system was not designed for. So I hope that answers your question. But that's the Florida Building Commission is very in tuned, and we've engaged third parties to make sure that we have as much information as possible, so as to render the code changes that we need to have in place after these events.
And you're chairman of this commission now. So over all of the 19 members, you said, how did you end up as chairman of the commission? And is that for just this edition, or how does that for the 9th, or how does that role work?
So the chairman is elected by the Florida Building Commission, and so each one of the commissioners, we have a vote when the chair's term is up, which is typically with each one of the editions. So I'll stay on as chair through the 9th edition, and then potentially, if voted in, would stay on longer, and if not, would happily step aside. But the chair is elected by the other members of the Florida Building Commission.
And did you want to be chair from when you joined, or how did that evolve? Were you vice chair before? How did you work into that role?
So my predecessor is Jim Schock, who did an outstanding job. He left some very big shoes to fill. Jim is a building official and an engineer, and very, very knowledgeable, and has been on the commission for a very long time. When I came in, quite frankly, the Florida Building Code in all its beauty is overwhelming. It is a huge animal to get your arm around, and I was overwhelmed when I first came onto the commission. I had a lot to learn. A lot of studying to do, a lot of time in the books to make sure that I understood not just what I'm familiar with, which as a general contractor, I've had background in residential and commercial construction, but there are other aspects and more specific, detailed aspects to the subtrades that I needed to be more aware of. And so there was a learning opportunity, that's what I'll call it, to get my arms around as much of it as I can. And then from there, I was asked to run for the chairmanship, and then subsequently was elected into that position.
Good job, Bourré.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
So let's keep talking about the current edition, the 8th edition, I believe it is. It went into effect at the end of 2023, my understanding of it. From the 7th edition, what were some of the significant changes that you might be able to highlight for our listeners, or updates that went into our current code?
Sure. Yeah, I would. Let me first offer that any listener can be part of the conversation, or certainly be informed on what is happening. If you log into floridabuilding.org, which is the Commission's website, you can listen to all of our discussion. It's all, so we operate within the sunshine, and which means that every meeting that we have is televised, is available for the public, and the commissioners have to operate just like any elected official. We are not allowed to have side conversations. We can only have conversations when it deals with something that's on the Commission's agenda or the Florida Building Code in the sunshine, which means out in the public. .org. And so you can go in and watch us, be part of that during public comment if you have anything you'd like to add. And then also you can see all of our historical meetings as well, which are all logged in there. So,
Michael,
John,
how often do you all meet? I'm sorry, how often do you all meet?
There are meetings every month. The Florida Building Commission meets about every 2 months. But we have TAC meetings, we have POC meetings, we have Hurricane Research Advisory Committee meetings. There's a lot of different elements. And so when you go to the floridabuilding.org website, if you scroll to the bottom of that website, you'll see our calendar. And that calendar shows all the meetings we have on a month-by-month basis. Obviously, if you're too far out, if you're at the end of this year, for instance, that calendar may not be set yet. But this month's calendar, next month's calendar, they're all set and ready. And so I would encourage any of your listeners to avail themselves of the opportunity to just, if nothing else, turn it on in the background and listen to the conversation and just be informed on what's happening. Because when code changes happen, as a builder or a developer or a subcontractor, they have a direct effect on our business. And so when those code changes that might negatively affect our business get put into place, they can affect obviously how we do it. So I always encourage, be part of the conversation initially up front. Don't wait till the code goes into effect and then throw the yellow flag and say, I don't like it. That's too late. So I'm going to encourage again, everybody come be part of the conversation. We need voices who are subject matter experts specifically, who understand the implication of code changes on finances, on buildability, on construction in general. So please come and be part of that. John, to answer your question, there are a plethora of adjustments. So what I'll start with is the code has been refined now for years. And I would say that, we're in a stage in the life cycle of our building code that we are now making minor adjustments. We're not making any huge changes to the code. We're making small adjustments. Now, I'll use the underlayment for shingled roofs. That was an adjustment. We had to overlap, so that you basically have 3 layers of underlayment in one area as you're running your roof. So, there are changes that affect how we build, but they're not huge catastrophic changes anymore. They're all minor changes. And so part of our POC is we have an educational POC, and that educational POC. So all the courses that come through DBPR to us for approval for our continuing education, those come to the Florida Building Commission. They come to us through our education POC. They review all the courses. They give a thumbs up or thumbs down. They make sure they conform and that they have all the information they're supposed to on whatever subject they're covering. Once those get approved at the POC level, they come to the commission. We review those, and then we send them out as an approved class for our contractors, subcontractors to take in order to prepare for the code changes that are coming. And so when your listeners are taking their continuing education classes, know that those classes have been vetted by the Florida Building Commission to be appropriate classes for them to take on all these code changes that come. So every 3 years, we have changes that come that we as builders, general contractors, developers, we need to know what they are. And that's the way we make sure that all of our builders understand what those changes are.
So I think going back to, and it sounds like there's like a maintenance phase to this, because being someone who saw the field testing of the Florida Building Code, it worked. Yeah. And you could almost drive down the street in what was, right here. I'm broadcasting from Sanibel Island today. I went to Fort Myers Beach right after the storm. And you could pick on the street almost the year of the house and pick 2001 before. Now, from a wind standpoint, I think it works. It really does. The water standpoint, like I said before, I think that's a new thing to address, because we do have some conflicting rules federally with what is the practical side of building resiliency. So where I'm going is the other issue, not only storm surge, but storm water. All of the local governments maintain their own storm water rules. And is the commission looking to step further into the storm water component so it's not as scattered across the different municipalities, counties now? Because I believe that's going to start playing a more significant role in these events.
So storm water itself, I would say, is not under the purview of the Florida Building Commission, but how the structures are affected by the storm water and storm surge is. And so we focus on how those structures are affected, what the result is, but storm water is dealt with in a different agency. And so that's not something that I would love to come and tell you that, hey, if you want to build up as high as you want to build up, as long as you're controlling your stormwater runoff on your site, you should be allowed to do that. I'm actually an advocate for that personally, but I can't say that as part of the Florida Building Commission, because that's not something that we as the commission, are able to wrap our arms around.
Well, should be.
Let's
Work on that. Right?
I agree.
They're all integral. We gotta fix the whole thing together. So back to you. I mean, this sounds like so much work, and I get it as well. When I stepped into the state's affordable housing, I had no idea what I didn't know, and I had no idea how much work it was going to be. How do you balance this with still running a large construction company and all these commitments? Like, how does Michael do all of this effectively?
Well, first, thank you for serving on that other board. I know that does take a lot of time. I'm familiar with that, so thank you for being a voice in that group. I'm blessed. That's the best way I can say it. I'm blessed. I've got let me start off with my family. I have an amazing wife who works harder than I do. She is very focused and helps me to maintain all the different frisbees that are flying in the air, and she works with me, and so I'm very blessed to have her with me. We're very fortunate to have a great staff at the Florida Building Commission. So the Florida Building Commission is connected or under DBPR, Department of Business and Professional Regulations, and the staff there are phenomenal. And so our technical advisor is Mo Madani. Mo is the code. He has been there since the ground floor, since day one. And in fact, I called him this morning and was talking to him about a separate issue. And he's able to recall elements in the code right off the top of his head. He literally lives and breathes the code, which is a blessing for us. So when I have questions, or when our commissioners have questions, they're able to reach out directly to staff, and specifically to Mo in this case, to be able to have those questions answered. We have Jeff Blair, who is our commission facilitator, and he's the nuts and bolts behind running the meetings and making sure that we stay on task and stay focused. And we don't go down too many rabbit trails. We do tend to go down rabbit trails sometimes, but that's just the nature of the beast. And so just across the board, it would be an overwhelming lift if I was doing this by myself, but I am not. I've got great staff at the Florida Building Commission. I've got great staff here in my office, and the Florida Building Commissioners, all of our TAC members, all of our POC members, all of our Hurricane Research Advisory Committee members. Because this is such a huge project and we have such a broad voice across the state of Florida, we're able to do this and make it look seamless. Of course, when sausage is made, it's never pretty, but at the end of the day, it's great to eat. And that's what we do. There's a lot of work behind the scenes, but when we bring it all together, and it all gels into one building code, it's a beautiful thing. And I say that as a builder because I love the code. I love making sure we're building structures across the state of Florida that keep the Florida citizens safe and are still affordable. That's the balance act. But to answer your question, Ryan, it's not me. I've been blessed by the people around me, and that's how this works.
Nice. Well, you've clearly accomplished a litany, an incredible list of successes, Michael. And I've known you now for just a few years through my involvement with Florida Home Builders Association. And everything I see about you and know about you and then get to know you is all based on success. With that, with all your accomplishments already have happened, what is the future for Michael Bourré? And what is the future for Bourré Construction Group? What do you see your next steps being?
Well, that's a loaded question, but I appreciate the question. So, it's focusing on the business, and I mean, truly, my next steps are enjoying my 2 grandchildren. My wife and I love spending time with the family, and so, I'll always continue to be engaged in our industry, engaged at Florida Home Builders Association, engaged in my local, and just continuing to do life the best that I am able to do it, and bring as much joy, and love to the people in my life, to my friends, friends, my family, and so that's my future. I don't have anything beyond that. I will tell you that I'm very very thankful for the builders in the state, for FHBA. I have been able to find a family that I never knew existed. And be part of that family and be a contributing member of that family, but also be on the sidelines and watch as other members step into leadership roles and blossom and enact changes that are important. And so it's been a blessing to be able to kind of see that process and be a part of that process. And the FHBA family is just such a great group of folks that we do a lot of hard work, but we also have a lot of fun doing it, just like other aspects in my life that I try to focus on.
Are your grandkids nearby? Do they live near you?
They are. They're actually
cool.
they're about 5 minutes from the house.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
very cool.
I may have coordinated that a little bit to make sure that they were close by, but that's what that's what grandfathers do. So.
Oh, that's really cool. How old are they?
Let's see. Connor is 6 now, and Winnie is 2.
Fun. Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
And what are you known as, Michael?
Yeah, what's your name?
Your name?
I'm known as Pepe, which
Okay.
is French. It's French for grandfather. Yeah.
Oh, cool. That's fun. Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming on today, doing the show with us. Thank you for your service to our country.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service to the state of Florida. Thank you for your service to the association. We really appreciate everything you do. I'm proud to consider you a great friend and honored to know you. So just thanks again for coming on today. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, gentlemen, thank you for having me. This has been a blast. I wasn't quite sure. I've never done a podcast before, so I wasn't sure what to expect, but thank you so much for the invitation. I've truly enjoyed it.
Oh,
Great. Thanks,
thank you.
Michael. Hey, and for our listeners, be sure to subscribe because you won't want to miss what's next. We have a lineup of great guests. So with that, that's a wrap on this show, but don't worry, we're already framing up the next one.
And that's a wrap on this episode of The Build-Up, brought to you by the Florida Home Builders Association. Keep the conversation going, and we'll catch you next time.